Alright friends, welcome back to the shop. And a couple things have changed probably since the last time we did this because it's been so long. Got some new things, got rid of some things that we weren't using, shuffled some things around. Haven't been down here as much as I'd like to, but wanted to do a little unboxing here because this is kind of a fun new toy to add to the collection. So let's jump right into it. And I already pulled the box off of it because I'm a little bit lazy here. Alright, so let's jump right into it. Down here in the shop, I've got a lot of woodworking tools. You see the table saw, you see some DeWalt stuff behind me, bandsaw here, there's a planer over there, dust collection, miter saw, CNC machine. But on the other side of that, we also have fooled around a little bit with 3D printing, and not as much perhaps as a lot of the folks on YouTube. So I bought a Dremel 3D printer, basically a FlashForge rebranded back when Dremel first launched the 3D20. And I've been using that FDM printer for quite some time, and it's served me pretty well. I've made a lot of mounts and little adapter hardware. I think I did a video on this table saw where I made a reducer for the vacuum before I got the dust collector. So I've used that quite a bit for practical parts, and I've kind of been lusting after one of the SLA printers, or essentially the resin printers, for a long time. Don't really have any main projects in mind for it, but Anycubic was running a sale, so I finally pulled the trigger on it. So that's what this is. This is a resin 3D printer. So inside of this little stack of foam is a Photon Mono SE. And so I think there's already been a couple of unboxings of these things on YouTube, but I thought it might be fun to go through just real quick like. So directions and spacing for the build plate, quality check, and we've got a bunch of the little accessories right here on the top of the box. So looks like we've got a tool here, like a little Allen key, a power supply, just an AC/DC power supply. This is a 12 volt 6 amp power supply, so a decent little power supply there. This is all of the little tiny pieces that come along with the Photon Mono. I did buy the Photon Mono SE, and this is actually based on the older Photon chassis. I think the original one that they developed. They've got some new ones out called the Mono and the Mono X, which have like a big acrylic or plastic dome that go over the top of them. You take the whole dome off to get to the printer. And I just really like the flip-up kind of lid on this because it keeps it all in one piece. For my space, that makes a lot more sense than trying to move that lid and find a place to set it down. It's just annoying. So that's why I kind of went with the Mono SE. If you're not familiar with these SLA printers, I've done a little bit of research here as I was kind of getting into buying one. And the mono in any one of these printers essentially means that they use a black and white LCD to control the exposure of the UV light to the resin vat. So essentially what they can do is they can cure that resin a lot faster using that monochromatic LCD. And that's why you'll see mono in a lot of these new ones. This technology has been around for quite some time, but it's just gotten really, really inexpensive at this point, and the quality of the prints is actually really impressive. A lot of folks use these for like building miniatures and making like little tabletop kind of figurines because it can render such amazing resolution in such an inexpensive device. So just really neat. I kind of wanted to dive into it. So let's take a look here. We've got a couple of little goodies inside this bag. Like I said, there's a USB key. There is a plastic scraper, which I think I already have from the Dremel. There's a little Wi-Fi antenna. This does have Wi-Fi. Some of their new ones don't actually have that feature. Looks like a bag of nitrile gloves here. A couple of screws, which I assume are to mount the handle hardware. One COVID mask, I guess. I think that's probably for dust. I don't know what you do with that if you were working with resin, but a couple of Allen keys here with ball ends, which is kind of nice, ball ends, so you don't have to be right on the money when you are tightening those screws up. A little after-sales service card. I think I got 2 of them here, so I guess I get twice the service. A tiny little flathead screwdriver. I'm not sure what that's for yet. And the handle for the actual printer, so we can open up that lid that I was talking about. There's a couple of other goodies in the little top part here. This is just a metal scraper, nice and sharp, so you should be able to get things off the build plate. One of the things that I never really invested in was a good set of tools for even my FDM printer. I really just kind of have makeshifted that as I've used it, so the scraper might actually come in handy for some of that work as well. And then, of course, standard old AC power cord that plugs into our DC adapter. So right there, and that looks like a fairly decent little cord. 3x18 gauge, so 3-conductor 18 gauge, nothing special. This is a low draw device. So big chunk of foam that was just protecting it as I pulled it out of the box. The actual printer here is in this foam here. So let's see if we can slide that out. Good luck. Let's pull this down. Make it a little easier on ourselves. Oh man, it weighs a good chunk here. This is all metal construction. So one of the big reasons, like I said, the newer Photon Mono is available, and it's actually a little bit cheaper than this one. But it's all plastic. Like the base is plastic. The inside's got an aluminum plate and an aluminum upright for the actual build plate, but the whole thing's kind of just built more cheaply. So I really like the Mono SE for that reason specifically, was that it just feels like a higher quality build. So let's get inside it here. Looks like we've got some plastic protective film. And then inside the actual device here, you can actually see got some nice hinges that kind of flip back and let it sit right down. They're actually metal hinges too, which is very surprising. I thought those were going to be plastic. Yeah, and there's some protective plastic there just so your inside parts don't get scratched up. Inside the printer, we have the actual build plate here. This uses a ball screw and a spring to level, so we'll fool around with that in a little bit when we start getting it set up. And then what else do we have in here? Big chunk of foam. Get it out of there. Yeah, that's just a big chunk of foam. And then the actual printer. So I'll turn it so maybe you guys can see a little bit better inside here. The build plate is down in the bottom already. It's just attached with these 2 thumb screws. This actually uses dual linear motion rails, which I liked a lot. That's another reason that I opted for the Photon Mono SE versus the standard Mono. Again, a little bit more money, but I just feel like the build quality in this one is a lot more significant when you look at how it's set up. So dual linear motion rails, lead screw here that raises the build plate. These appear to be resin filters that are in the bag here, so you can filter your resin before you pour it back into the storage. And then we could take this little resin vat out here. So another thing to note, if you're considering the Mono SE versus the Mono, and I feel like I'm just comparing these things for you guys, but I just went through the kind of decision-making process myself, so a couple of things that popped into my head. When you buy the Mono, the Photon Mono, it's, like I said, about 50 or 100 bucks cheaper at this point. It comes with a plastic resin vat, and with the resin vat, essentially you've got this FEP film, which is kind of like a really, it's a plastic film, really optically transparent, that allows the resin to cure on it, but then easily come off of it as it raises to build that next layer, right? This whole thing in the Mono, the cheaper version, is plastic, and that kind of seems cheesy to me. I don't know why. When you're tightening something down and almost like kind of like a drum head, you kind of want that extra structure, I think, of the aluminum. So that's a big reason that I actually picked this one. You can buy an aluminum resin vat for the Mono, the standard Mono, but when you look at then adding on a piece like that, you're getting pretty close to just buying this one. So one of the big deciding factors was that you got the vat right here that's aluminum right out of the box. There is protective film on the monochromatic LCD down here. I've seen some other videos where people weren't quite privy to where that was. It's actually under the build plate, so you can peel that off, and that actually exposes it so that you can start building. And then as you kind of like flip this down here, there's actually a magnet that holds this closed. So you can kind of see it latches it down. So I think the intent there is to keep some of the resin fumes going through the actual carbon filter. And there's another standalone feature of the SE is you get that carbon filter versus the Mono, which doesn't have that feature built in. So some cool things, some maybe thoughts if you are considering buying one of these. All said and done on this particular purchase here, Anycubic is running a sale right now, so these are generally around 350 bucks, I think, 380 bucks if you go on the website with no sale. This was marked down to 339 on Amazon. There was a $40 Amazon coupon that brought it down to 300. And then there was another promotion where if you bought the Washin Cure Station, which, foreshadowing, we have the Washin Cure Station as well, you got another 15% off. So this ended up costing me like 260 bucks, which when I compare it again, the resin vat quality, some of the additional features that are in the SE, hard to beat for $260 something versus spending the $200 on the all plastic build of the standard Mono. They both have the same resolution. The Mono does technically have just a hair more build volume, especially in the vertical space, but honestly, the things I'm doing, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. Like I said, for shadowing, we do have the wash and cure station. So let's pull that thing out of the box too. Take a look at that. All right, second act here. So like I said, as part of buying this, to get the best discount, you bundled in the wash and cure. And there's actually a couple versions of wash and cure that Anycubic's got. They came out with the Wash and Cure 1.0. Didn't really have a number at that point. This is version 2. It is denoted as such anywhere you search for it. And then they have a bigger version, which actually just has more UV LEDs and a little bit more volume for the bigger printers like the Mono X. So I went with the Wash and Cure 2, the standard size, because of course I've got the Mono SE, which is not a massive printer like the Mono X is. And I paid about $106 for this after all the discounts got worked out. So $260 for that, $106 for this, $360 for the set. I wasn't actually going to buy the wash and cure. If you know anything about it, essentially it's a way that you are able to dip the print in isopropyl alcohol, which gets rid of the resin that isn't cured. And then you can dry that thing off, put it back in, and it gets exposed to UV light to really solidify that print and make it then a little bit more durable. So you can do that by hand. You can do it with a toothbrush and a Tupperware. You can stick it out in the sun for a few minutes, and that will do the job. But everybody says that having everything on one desk, all the reading that I did, it just makes it a lot easier. And for $100, I figured, what the heck, if I'm going to dive into this whole process, let's get the Wash and Cure 2. So here we are, Wash and Cure. I'm reaching underneath because to start out, there's a secret little box at the bottom of the Wash and Cure, which is a weird place to put it, Anycubic. And inside of this box, there are a few parts. So this particular box contains the rotating UV exposing platform. So this actually rotates and allows your print to be exposed evenly all the way around. It includes a mount for the actual build plate, so that you can actually drop the whole build plate into the wash and cure system. And then we've got a couple more Allen keys, another bearing, which I assume is what the plate rides on. So it's got a replacement bearing here. Not sure if it's an odd size or not, but it's in there. And then another quality assurance card in the back of that bag. So just some basic little goodies. The wash and cure, there's really not a lot to it. And actually, as we look at it, you'll get a look at what the Photon Mono X would have looked like had I bought it. So here's the wash and cure. There's no flip up lid option for this. So you get what you get. And so here we are with the standard big acrylic bucket that they give you for the wash and cure. And that's what I was telling you. The Mono that you would buy that would compete with this Mono SE comes with like basically the same lid. They're not exactly the same, but they're darn close. And these are UV filtered lids, so you don't have UV popping out. Protects the resin while it's curing, but it also protects resin, uncured resin, in the case that you're printing on it. So here's the actual lid for it. Inside here, we've got a couple of the parts for it. So we've got the user manual, Wash and Cure 2.0 user manual. It's actually a color user manual. I've been impressed with the documentation that's included with these. They're all printed in color, which is kind of crazy. Most of the stuff's just in PDFs at this point. It's got a big vat for your isopropyl alcohol bath. This has actually got a rubber gasket. So that's kind of neat because it should keep it from absorbing moisture. So if you leave isopropyl out without a lid on it, it will just absorb moisture from the air, and it also evaporates. So there's just not a real good reason to do that. It'll just protect the alcohol and let you use it for longer, keep it for longer. This is a reflector. I've seen a lot of folks on YouTube pull this reflector out and then just stick it on with the blue side or the red side up. It actually has protective film on both sides, guys. So if you're using it with the film on it, just take the film off. It's actually a silver reflector underneath. That's what it's supposed to do. And then inside here, we've got a few goodies. There's more goodies than I thought in this, actually. A couple of foam bricks. Everything's really well packed in here, too. So an observation. And then we've got almost like a turkey fryer basket here that you drop your print into the bath while it's being washed. So there's that. Down in the bottom of our resin, or our resin vat, our isopropyl bath, we've got a magnetic stirrer. So if you've ever seen those lab stir plates, essentially this works on the same idea. Instead of a stir bar, which you just drop into like a beaker, this actually has it attached to the bottom of the vat. It's an aluminum piece. Again, I'm really impressed with everything so far build quality wise. And actually, I guessed wrong. The bearing that they gave you a spare on, that's the bearing that's in this. So you have a spare if that bearing goes out. And that makes a lot of sense because it's sitting in a vat of uncured resin and alcohol. So I imagine at some point or another, it probably does get seized up. So here's the big vat that stores that liquid. Here's the top. It does say keep in a cool, dry, and ventilated place. Keep away from fire. Keep containers sealed. And more information, you can find it in the manual. So we'll bust into the manual in a second here. This is the actual base of the wash and cure. This is where all the magic happens, essentially. And this is very similar, again, to the mono. Just the standard mono in how it looks. So it's got the plastic build outside. All the electronics are housed in the bottom of this. There's a stepper motor in this thing, actually. I've done a little research on it. So it's a stepper motor, so it can be controlled for speed, can be controlled for direction. And that's how they allow you to do like a stirring or a tidal stirring inside of that alcohol, which allows it to wash more thoroughly than just spinning in one direction continuously for 10 minutes, right? It'll spin, it'll stop, it'll go the other direction. And by doing that, it's breaking free some of that resin that might be stuck in the little crevasses of your tiny prints, and especially for the fine prints, like I said, miniatures and stuff, that can be really handy. So here it is. This is not as impressive build quality wise. I'm just going to say that. I can feel it. It's light. It's just got a standard LED light emitting diode display. It's not an LCD at all. Segmented. And there's, of course, 4 pieces here. There's 2 options, wash and then cure mode. There's a jog and a button underneath that jog to make your selection. So really basic device here. It does have on the back, this is interesting, a little photo sensor, and I see on the back of our little cover here, there's actually a sticker that reflects off that photo sensor, and that keeps you from opening it while it's spinning for curing or washing, I assume both, so that you're not exposing everything around you to those ultraviolet light bulbs that are in here. So let's find out what's in this final little box. This was inside of the alcohol vat, so let's see what's in here. Oh, yep, of course. I overlooked that, but this is actually the AC adapter. And so this is just a wall wart style AC adapter. It is another 12 volt output. This is actually 3 amps as well, though, so that's not an insignificant little adapter. 3 amp, 12 volt adapter. Is it positive tip? It is positive tip. And it's one of those universal styles, so you get sent whatever one is most appropriate for your region. I'm in North America here, of course. So you stick it on and you twist it and it locks into place, I assume. That's exactly what it does. So there you go. So that's the wash and cure. There's not as much here. Like I said, this particular piece, you can peel this protective film off. You set it on here, and then you got your rotating plate to cure it under the UV light. When you're not curing, you can remove the reflector so that it's not getting beat up by the dish here, and you can set your washing vat onto it. Now, when you set that washing vat onto it, I know you guys can't see it on camera, but it's actually syncing itself up with the magnets underneath. Like I said, it's like almost like one of those laboratory magnet stir bars. So it's syncing itself up. And that means if something does fall in there and stop it up, it's not going to burn up the motor either, which is kind of cool. I have read a couple of pieces of feedback on it that the basket here does not have a fine enough mesh for some of the smaller miniatures or other things that you might be making. Because this has such fine resolution, if something tips over while it's being washed, because it is being agitated, the piece might fall through that little tiny grid down in the bottom here, and it ends up in the stir bar. And guess what happens? Well, it's spinning a little resin miniature like that. Piece just gets snapped right off. So there were some complaints about that. People were putting or cutting like a piece of like aluminum screen and dropping it in the bottom there that's finer mesh, just so your print doesn't get beat up by the stir. I don't know that that'll be a big problem. Again, I'm not printing a ton of miniatures. We may try that just as a test because I think they're just impressive to show how far this technology has come. But that's the wash and cure. So much more simple overall device. We'll do this here. Let's set it up like we were about ready to cure. So we'll put our reflector on and we'll pull out our little spinning table here. This drops in. It's splined instead of magnetic. So this is splined. It goes right on that same stepper. And then we drop this over the top. It's got the safety interlock in the back there. We flip on the power and then we can start curing our resin print. So that's kind of the wash and cure. Wash and cure, like I said, only $100 on top of it. Honestly, this is probably where they're making all their money because I'm looking at what we get for that money, and it's not as interesting. It's not as complex as something like this, and I only paid like $260 for this. So just interesting all around. But again, they complement one another, and they do make it really easy for me in the basement here to do the whole thing end to end without having to take the miniature outside, take the print outside, let it cure. I'm in Michigan. If you're not familiar with my channel, you'll probably have seen other insinuations that I'm in Michigan. And that means that we have about 6 or 7 months of winter. And so we don't necessarily have the greatest conditions all the time for doing outdoor type curing. So this will come in handy in the basement here. So let's get this all put together. Let's find a place for it in the shop, and then let's try to print something. All right, so got it all leveled out, and the machine I think is pretty much ready to go. Famous last words. I downloaded Kytubox or Chytubox, I don't know how you say that. And I loaded up Lattice Benchy, which I have honestly never printed the Benchy print in a standard format, but with the resin printer, it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's just this big solid block of boat, I guess. So the Lattice seemed really cool. I saw it on one of the other printer channels, and I just thought it was a really cool idea. So I loaded that up in Kytubox, and I loaded up the Machine Anycubic Photon Mono SE profile. I didn't change any of the settings. It looked like the initial layer exposure time was set to 40 seconds, and then the subsequent layer settings were 1.5 seconds. And again, it's the mono printer, so 1.5 seconds is theoretically doable. This is the resin that I'm using. It's the gray UV resin, and it is only, the guidance on the back is hilarious. It only has the standard photon guidance. So it's 20 to 80 seconds for first layer exposure, and then 3 to 15 seconds for subsequent exposures, which would be with the RGB LCD, which has those 3 layers, less UV exposure, slower printing. So it doesn't have any guidance for the one that I bought, but everything that I've read says that 1.5 seconds is totally doable. So I'm going to try that and see if we actually get a print here. So I did an 80% scale on the Lattice Benchy, so it's like 50 by 28 millimeter by 45 millimeter, roughly. So it's just a little bit smaller than standard. And then I saved it out as a PWMS file, I believe. Which is the actual file that the printer wants. And so when I save that out, I put it on the USB drive. It's actually over in the printer now. So again, I'm not going to go through all the slicer settings. I don't know much about Kytubox myself. So we're going to run it with the default settings. All I did was import an STL file, slice it with the Kytubox slicer, hit save, and I output a file. So I didn't do anything fancy here. If it doesn't work, we may have to go back and play with it. But let's go ahead, load it into the printer, pour some resin in, and see what happens. All right, so the USB drive is in the side. You stick it in the side. It's right next to the power supply. I've donned my safety PPE gloves here. I've got some glasses on. Getting resin in your eyes seems like a terrible idea, so some glasses, the gloves, and we're just going to pour it into the vat. There's a max fill line on this for the resin, so I'm going to fill it up to the max fill line. I don't think that the Benchy is going to use all that resin, but we can always filter it and put it back into the bottle. And then we'll start printing, and I guess we'll see how it goes. So let's do that. Yeah, that's some goop. I didn't shake this up, and it smells funny already, so let's shake it up. Here because I don't think we need that much for what we're printing. It's not a huge print, so I'm a little bit under max fill. Here, I'll turn it maybe so you guys can see a little bit better. And so you can see the line there. I'm a little bit under it with the resin. The resin's kind of bubbly. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know if I should let it sit for a second and maybe settle out because I just shook it all up. Resin's kind of funny. You know, if you have any bubbles under that thing as it comes down, my assumption is that you're going to have a failed spot that doesn't cure because there's air, right? So I'm not sure what the best approach here. Does it say anything about that? Shake well before use, wear gloves, wash with plenty of fresh water. No, it doesn't say anything about that. I've seen everybody just pour it in and go, so I guess we're going to try that. The resin's in. The thing is theoretically leveled. Lattice Benchy is on the USB stick over here. I've actually got the main menu up, so You can see here, maybe, let's see if you guys can see, you can see it. There's print, system, and tools. So if we hit print, we get a list of all the files that are on the USB stick. There's a RERF file, which is a test print file. There's a test file that actually does like an Anycubic and a cube. I've seen everybody print that, which is why I'm not going to print it. I want to try this Benchy print and see if we can get any success. So I'm going to click on Benchy here. It says 3D lattice benchy.pwms. That's the file extension that I was talking about. And then we've got a trash can, a play, and a go back. Hopefully the trash can doesn't just immediately delete it. I hope there's like a confirmation, because that's the first icon that shows up. That seems really bizarre to me. But the play button's in the middle here, so let's hit play. And it is motoring down. I'm going to move you guys in just a little bit closer and see if you can see it. Alright, so the build plate's pulled off, and like I said, everything looks really good. I am just so impressed with, God, the printing is just really, really impressive, considering I've been using that Dremel from almost 5 or 6 years ago plus now. You can kind of see how it turned out here. It looks just great. I don't see any major errors as far as that goes. I'm not real well versed in this kind of printing though, so there could be something you guys see if you know more about it than I do. But it sure looks complete. I moved you over a little bit closer. So I've kind of set up a little station here to clean this, pre-clean it at least. I'm kind of keeping one hand. If you've ever dredged like chicken or made chicken nuggets, keeping one hand the wet hand and one hand the dry hand here. So I'm going to try to keep this one to be able to operate some stuff. This one's got resin on it already. Let's just give this a spray off here, kind of pre-clean it, and see how it looks. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Just getting the major resin that was uncured off of the plate is what I was trying to shoot for here. The plate itself, I hit the back of it too, just to kind of run it down. And so that should do for kind of our pre-wash here. Let's go ahead and break this thing off of the build plate and get it in the actual wash and cure. So I've got the metal spatula here. We're going to try this. Again, haven't done this before. I've got kind of a dirty work surface here so I can throw it away when it's done. So we're going to... Oh, it came off really nice and easy. Holy cow. I was not expecting it to come off that easily. Oh man, cool. God, it's so good. Just really cool. Okay, loaded up here. Got the mesh in already, or the basket. It's in here. So we'll just set the little guy down in here. Let him drop in. Put the top on it here. Kind of like a blender. I don't want it to go all over the place. I don't know how violent it is. And then let's go ahead and set the wash and cure to 10 minutes here. There you go. So really easy. Just dial it up to whatever number you want. I just set it to 10 minutes here. And then it's going to start agitating the isopropyl. and hopefully clean all the remaining resin out of there before we go ahead and cure it. So washed up here. So I have shop air down here, which is actually super convenient. What I'm trying to do is just blow through all the lattices there, really dry out the alcohol that's left on this. Anything that's left on here from the detergent or the bath stage, I guess, will turn into like a white milky substance, which is fairly undesirable, I suppose. So pretty dry. You can still feel it. I mean, the resin definitely still feels soft. That's the best way to describe it, because it's not cured yet. So that's kind of the deal here. We're gonna go to the cure step next. So let's set up the machine for that, and then we'll go ahead and show you the final product. The interlock should be good, and then super key, because I've seen people do this already. I'm gonna take these off because I think they're done with them. Switch it over to cure. If you turn it on wash while you're on the axis here, it'll just launch the thing off there because it spins so fast. So we're gonna set this thing to about 7 minutes. Let's go 8. What do we got, please? Off she goes. UV lights are on, then she's floating around there, and in about 8 minutes we should have a cured print that's much harder and less sticky than it was. Alright guys, let's put a bow on it here. Benchy printed, alright, Lattice Benchy, so he printed pretty good. Like I said, there's a little license plate on the back that says like hashtag 3D Benchy. I actually, as I was looking more closely at it, because I scaled it down to 80%, you can see that it just got really tiny. So honestly, I think I might have scaled it so far that the resolution got a little bit ridiculous for even that printer, which is saying something for sure. Otherwise, structurally, it looks awesome. I've just gone over it. Even some of the flat deck surfaces, I know you guys are farther away now, are really, really nice and clean. Up at the top here, I have a couple of bubbles, and on the bottom of the base where I poured the resin in right before I started the print, I have bubbles as well. And I definitely have a compressed first couple layers here. I can tell because I don't have any of that embossed logo on the bottom. So it didn't come out quite perfectly, but I'm really impressed with it considering it's a first print. I think it turned out really nice. Cured it up, and what we have found out is this thing is screwed up. It works to clean, obviously, because the interlock is not involved in cleaning. But as soon as I switch over to UV light mode or curing mode, it will run for a few minutes, and then it will act as if the cover's been removed, even though the cover's standing on. And I actually caught some video of that as it was curing Benchy here. So it started happening. I went ahead and took the cover off, reseated it, couldn't get it to come back. Unplugged it, power cycled it, tried all the normal things, right? And basically I can get it to come back sometimes and it acts like the interlock is okay. And then a couple minutes into the cure, it will fail again. It will just beep like the cover's been removed, even though the cover's sitting on it and no one's even near it. So there's a problem with the interlock on this, which is disappointing because this thing is, like I said, this thing is just, it's a cheap piece of equipment. There's nothing to it. There's 4 screws on the bottom of it, and it's just a little tiny cable that runs up to that interlock. I'm certain that it could be bypassed. It's voltage, ground, and sense or signal. So I'm sure it could be bypassed, but honestly, it's brand new, and that's annoying. So I'm just gonna go ahead and send it back and get a replacement for it, because what the heck. It's Amazon. Fortunately, Amazon's return should be super simple. So I think we'll just send this back and get a replacement for it. I'm impressed with it otherwise, right? It cleaned just fine, and curing obviously worked as long as I fought it to get Benchy done here. So that's kind of the Anycubic experience so far. The Photon Mono SE, giving that a thumbs up. It turned out really nice. We're going to play with it a little bit more over the weekend. The Washin cure is it is what it is. It's a cheap piece of equipment. I'm not thrilled with it just because it's broken, but I think once we get a good one, it'll be fine for what we're doing here, and I think for the money, it's fine. So thanks for watching, guys. If you liked what you saw here, come along with us on some other cool shop projects. We've been doing a lot of different things on the channel lately. If you like it, hit that like button. If you don't, feel free to subscribe and come back when we post something you like. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.